Shalom. Seems appropriate to start that way today because we're going to start a series of devotionals based on what's called in the Psalms the Songs of Ascent. That's Psalm 120 through 134. Many scholars believe that these psalms were collected and labeled as a group in about 445 BC. That's kind of specific, but they see it as what the Levites did in order to celebrate the restoration of the walls in Jerusalem and the gates in Jerusalem by Governor Nehemiah at the time. And as the people were able to have their identity and they're collected now in the presence of God, and they've come back from Babylon and from other countries in order to be God's people in God's presence. And that's what these songs focus on. But they also focus metaphorically on a pilgrim journey. It's not just the physical Jerusalem that's in mind. It's how do you move into the presence of God? Ascent is coming from the same word in Hebrew that you get the word aliyah from, the return. Going up is the return to Jerusalem from Babylon, from other countries. There's been many aliyahs back to the Holy Land by the Jewish nation. The last one in the 1940s that is still a nation today. But the aliyah is going up, but it's also a restoration of the people being the people of God. A long obedience, discipleship path. And the metaphors are very poetic and very beautiful. The images are highly impactful, and they use that for memory device. I can remember some of the songs back in the 1980s when my kids were growing up. They used to go run around the house and sing all these commercial ditties, Standard Improvement Company and some of the others, and they still can do it today. They haven't forgotten those. There's a powerful memory device built in. And so we want our hearts set on that pilgrimage. And the way to do that is to draw these Psalms into our hearts and draw strength from them. So we're going to start with Psalm 120. Psalms 120 is a beautiful psalm, very short. So I'm going to read it to you, and then we'll kind of explore some of the ideas. In my distress, I called to the Lord, and he answered me. Lord, rescue me from lying lips and a deceitful tongue. What will he give you, and what will he do to you, you deceitful tongue? A warrior's sharp arrows with burning broomwood coals. What misery that I have stayed in Meshech and have lived among the tents of Kedar. I have dwelt too long with those who hate peace. I am for peace, but when I speak, they are for war. Our spiritual journey often starts in distress. It starts when we recognize that deep hole inside of us, that distress that comes from understanding that we live in a world that is full of lies, and we actually have lies in us. And that distress opens a road back to God's presence. There's a lot of that going on today. There should be more distress over all the lying lips and the slander and not knowing who to trust and the unease that comes with that. Who do we believe? Feeling. My distress, I call to the Lord. He turns to Yahweh. He turns away from his own and asks for God to deliver him from the deceitful tongue, slander. Slander was one of the 4 primary sins that the rabbis had on their list in the time of Jesus. It was idolatry, incest, murder, and slander as the 4 top worst things you could do in your life. And there's a reason for that. The tongue is a very powerful weapon to hurt and divide. We have more illustrations of that today than I can remember growing up. In our dialogue between people and people hurting each other, it's just amazing the power of slander to destroy the social fabric, the trust that needs to be between us. And so as the psalmist has experienced this slander, he turns to God to give him something. And he confesses. He says, I've lived too long in Meshech and in the tents of Kedar. And that doesn't ring for us. Who's Meshech? Who's Kedar? What is he talking about? Well, Kedar is a long ways to the southeast. It's a very barbarian tribe, a very vicious tribe of natives in the northern Arabian desert at that time. And Meshech is a very powerful people way up north, all the way up by the Caspian Sea. And the psalmist is saying, I have been away from Jerusalem. I've been away from God's presence. I've been out there on my own. I've been doing my own life. Basically, I've bought into the things that are around me, and I'm not seeking God's holy presence. What happens when you understand that? That's called distress. And when you start back, you make a decision and say, I'm headed back to Jerusalem. That's called repentance in the Bible. So he's repenting. He's calling on God to help him understand how to become a man of peace. In fact, he says, I'm a man of peace, but every time I speak peace, they speak war. Well, he may have a high view of himself because he may be a man of peace that is like some of the men of peace I've seen running around on Facebook, that they're peaceful as long as everybody agrees with them. But if the people don't agree with them one way or the other, they become very vicious and very, very hostile and attack another person's character that they may or might not even know simply because of something they say or believe. And when you see that, you understand that there's a real tension. How do we find peace? How do we define it? Where do we turn to? How do you live peaceful when people are at war with you for what you think and what you do? Well, there's only one role model I know of, the only one that has succeeded walking that course. His name's Jesus. And when he came to this world, he talked about peace, but he lived the peace. He lived it all the way to the end of his life. He accepted hostility into his life from people that he was trying to bring back to peace. And that's where the Psalm starts us, as a commitment to the road of peace, to be a person for peace, even though we're in an environment of war. And we don't bring peace into an environment of war by bringing hostile words and a slanderous spirit, the psalmist says. God, save me from that. Don't let me contribute. Help me be part of the solution.